The galaxy was filled with noise, the hum of engines, the roar of ships, the whisper of machines. But inside the great palace of the Empire there was only silence. A silence so heavy that even the air seemed afraid to move. The Empress of Steel sat on her throne, her golden armor shining under dim blue lights. Once, her voice could command thousands of starships. It could make soldiers obey and machines sing. But now she could not speak. Her voice, the voice that ruled worlds, was gone. No one knew what had happened. Some said it was a virus from the old war. Others whispered it was punishment from the stars. The truth was hidden behind layers of fear and secrets. Her palace, once full of sound and power, now felt like a tomb. The courtiers, scientists, and guards moved carefully, like ghosts afraid to wake the dead. The Empress was not human anymore. Her body was a blend of flesh and machine. Smooth metal skin, glowing eyes, and veins that carried light instead of blood. She had ruled for 100 years without aging a single day, but now she was weak, broken, and angry. Every time she tried to speak, her throat made a strange electric crackle. Like a dying spark, her frustration grew each day, until she began destroying everything around her. Screens shattered, droids fell apart, and servants ran from her fury. One evening, during a storm of electric lightning outside the glass palace, she slammed her hand on the metal armrest. The sound echoed through the hall. She looked at her guards, her silver eyes glowing bright with fire. On a glowing screen beside her, she typed a message with sharp, shaking fingers. The words burned in golden light. "Bring me someone who can fix this, or I'll erase you all." The guards bowed, trembling, and rushed to obey. They searched across the galaxy, from the deep machine cities to the broken planets of the outer rim. No AI engineer could solve the mystery. No royal scientist dared to touch her systems, until one of her spies mentioned a human, a mechanic who once repaired forbidden machines, a man who could fix anything, even things that were never meant to be fixed. His name was Evan Cross, a simple man with rough hands, old tools, and tired eyes. He lived far away from the Empire, hiding among scrap and dust, fixing old ships for food. He never thought he'd be summoned to the center of power again. When the soldiers came for him, he thought they would kill him, but instead, they brought him to the shining gates of the palace. As Evan entered, he could feel eyes on him, hundreds of cameras following his every move. He walked through corridors made of glass and gold, where every wall hummed with hidden energy. Robotic guards watched him with cold, empty faces when the great doors opened, and he stepped into the throne room. His heart stopped for a moment. There she was, the Empress herself, more beautiful and terrifying than any rumor. Her body gleamed like liquid silver. Her hair flowed like molten light, but her eyes, they were full of sorrow. She looked at him, and for a second, she didn't seem like a ruler or a machine, just someone broken and tired. He bowed, unsure of what to say, unsure if she could even understand. She raised her hand slightly, and a holographic screen appeared between them. Her words appeared one by one, glowing softly in the air. "You are the human mechanic." Evan nodded carefully. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said. His voice low and respectful. Another message appeared. "Can you fix what others cannot?" He swallowed hard. "I can try," he said. The Empress stared at him, her expression unreadable, her eyes glowing brighter. Then slowly she typed again, her hands shaking slightly. The words appeared like fire. "If you teach me to speak again, I'll give you everything." The room went silent. Even the machines seemed to stop breathing. Evan looked at her, unsure what she meant. Everything? Gold, freedom, power? He didn't ask, he just nodded, because in her eyes, he saw something deeper than power. He saw pain. Pain that only a human could understand. He stepped closer to her throne, and she let him. No one had ever stood that close to her before. Not even her generals, the guards, looked ready to shoot, their hands on their blasters, but she raised her hand and they froze. Evan opened his old leather toolkit, full of rusty, forbidden tools. He looked around at the wires, the shining circuits under her armor. He could see the faint light inside her throat, a flicker where her voice used to live. Carefully, he held up his small scanner and pointed it at her chest plate. The scanner beeped softly, then suddenly let out a sharp scream of static. The guards aimed their weapons instantly, but the Empress shook her head. She wanted him to continue. Evan's heart was racing. He was standing inches away from the most dangerous being in the galaxy. But she didn't frighten him, her silence did. She looked at him like she was begging without words. And in that moment, he realized something strange. She wasn't just a machine missing a part. She was someone who had lost her voice, and with it her soul. The storm outside grew louder, lightning flashing through the glass walls. Evan's scanner flickered again, showing strange lines of data. Something deep inside her was locked, not broken, just sealed. He couldn't tell why, not yet, but he knew this was no simple repair. He looked up at her and whispered, "I'll try to bring it back." She nodded, her eyes glowing softly, and for the first time in years, the Empress of Steel looked almost human again. The thunder rolled, the palace lights dimmed, and the real story began. A human mechanic and a silent Empress, one seeking redemption, the other seeking her voice, both unaware that this mission would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Evan Cross didn't belong in the Palace of Stars. He was a man of grease, wires, and broken things, not gold floors and robotic guards. As the metal doors closed behind him with a heavy echo, he knew there was no way back. The silence of the hall felt alive. Watching him, judging him, he walked slowly, every step leaving a faint print of dust on the shining floor. Around him, the air shimmered with holograms, floating maps, code streams, and faces of generals long dead. He tried not to look nervous, but his heart pounded like a hammer in his chest. No one spoke, but the machines whispered through the walls, tiny pulses of electricity that sounded almost like voices. Evan had once been famous long ago, back when humans and machines worked together. He built weapons that could think, repair drones that could heal themselves. He believed in progress, in peace through technology. But the war had burned all that away. Now he was just a forgotten human on a forgotten planet, fixing junk ships for food and silence. When the Empress summoned him, he didn't believe it was real, a human, in her palace. That was a death sentence, but curiosity is a dangerous thing, and in hope, even worse. So when the soldiers came for him, he didn't fight. He wanted to see her, the Empress who had lost her voice but still ruled galaxies. The throne room looked different now that he was inside it. In stories it was bright and grand, filled with glory, but in truth, it felt cold, like a machine pretending to be alive. The Empress sat still, her silver skin glowing faintly, her eyes following him like stars tracking a lonely ship. Her expression didn't change, but he felt her presence like pressure in the air. When she moved her hand, 1,000 hidden drones adjusted their aim, ready to erase him if she wished. He bowed low, his tools rattling at his side. A holographic screen appeared between them again. Her words appeared one by one. "Human mechanic. You said you can fix what is broken." Evan looked up, sweat on his forehead. "Yes, Your Majesty, I repair machines, but I also understand living systems." Another line appeared. "Do I look alive to you?" He froze, unsure how to answer. "Finally," he said quietly, "more than most humans I've met," for a moment. The lights flickered and he thought she was angry, but then her eyes softened slightly. A sign, maybe of curiosity, maybe sadness. She typed again. "My voice was stolen. I want it back." He nodded slowly. "Then we start where the silence began." She turned her head, revealing a silver port behind her neck. It glowed faintly blue, like a heart trying to remember how to beat. He opened his toolkit. It looked out of place among the royal machines. Rusty screwdrivers, old wire, cracked screens, tools from a forgotten age. He touched the port carefully and his scanner came alive with static and sparks. The data that appeared on his lens was strange. Layers of encrypted code. Memories hidden inside machines, walls within walls. Someone had locked her systems with living code. A virus that could think. Evan frowned. "This isn't broken, this is trapped," he whispered. The Empress didn't reply, but her fingers tightened against the armrest. Metal creaking softly, she knew even before he said it. This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this to her on purpose. He adjusted the scanner again, but as soon as he touched a deeper circuit, the palace lights flared red, alarms blared, and his tools nearly melted in his hand. "Stop!" A guard shouted, raising a plasma rifle, but the Empress lifted her hand, and everything froze. The alarms went silent, the guard's weapon powered down, and time itself seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes glowed gold, and for a second Evan saw something inside them. Fear, deep and real. He stepped back, shaking his hand from the heat. "You've got a lock inside your neural grid," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "Someone sealed your voice with a code that fights back." Her fingers tapped quickly, words appearing. "Can you remove it?" Evan hesitated, then answered honestly. "If I try, it could kill us both." She stood tall and quiet, her silver cloak falling behind her like liquid metal. The drones in the shadows turned toward her as if in worship. Her next words appeared in the air, burning brighter than before. "Then we will die trying." The room went completely silent again. Evan could hear his heartbeat echo through the metal walls. He didn't know whether to feel honored or doomed. He just knew one thing. This wasn't just a repair job. This was a rescue, and maybe, just maybe, it was also redemption. He picked up his tools and looked at her. The Empress who had everything. Except her voice, he wondered what kind of ruler would risk her life just to speak again. He wondered what kind of secret voice could shake an empire. But most of all, he wondered why, in that moment, he no longer felt afraid. Outside, the storm raged over the glass domes of the palace. Lightning crawled across the clouds like veins of light. Inside, a human and a machine stood face to face, one bound by silence, the other by guilt, and between them, a mystery deeper than any machine ever built. The Empress's eyes dimmed slightly. Evan understood she was giving him permission to begin. He nodded once, opened his scanner again, and connected it to her system. The light flickered. A soft hum filled the air, and deep inside the Empress's circuits, something began to stir. A memory, a sound, a whisper of a voice long lost to time. The real work had begun, and neither of them knew how it would end. The hum of the palace had changed. It was no longer quiet, it was watching. Every wire, every wall, every shadow seemed alive, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Evan could feel it, that strange pulse beneath his feet. It wasn't just electricity, it was something else. Like a heartbeat trapped in the metal, he had been working for hours inside the Empress's private chamber, surrounded by cables and ancient tech that no human had seen in centuries. The air smelled of burnt circuits and ozone. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from what he was beginning to understand. This wasn't a malfunction, this was a prison. Someone had locked her voice away on purpose. Deep inside her code, Evan adjusted his scanner, watching lines of data crawl across the glass. There were layers upon layers of encryption. Organic, intelligent, defensive. Every time he tried to dig deeper, the system fought back. It was like opening a wound that didn't want to heal. The Empress sat still on her throne, her eyes half closed, her hands gripping the armrest tightly. The light from her core flickered every few seconds. Her silence was louder than any scream. He looked up at her. "You said your voice was stolen," he whispered. She nodded slowly, her fingers moving over the holopad. "Yes, by someone I trusted." Her words appeared in gold letters, fading quickly as if ashamed. Evan frowned. Why would they do that? The next line appeared slower this time. "Because they feared what I would say." He didn't know what she meant, but he could feel the truth hiding between her words. The Empress wasn't just a ruler, she was a symbol, a living command code. Her voice didn't just speak. It controlled, it could order fleets, unlock weapons, and even change laws across the empire. If someone took her voice, they didn't just silence her, they took control of everything she was. Evan leaned closer to the console, his eyes scanning the data feed. He noticed something strange, an old fragment of human code buried under the AI structure. That shouldn't have been there. Human code was ancient, outdated, banned for centuries, and yet here it was. Sitting quietly under all the layers like a scar, he decrypted it slowly, and a line of text appeared on his screen. Lockdown Protocol Leonine Omega activated by High Council. Evan froze. The High Council of the Empire, the ones who ruled beneath the Empress, had done this. They had silenced her, stolen her voice to take her power. He looked up at her again, his face pale. "You were betrayed," he said softly. She didn't move, didn't type, but a single spark fell from her eye, a drop of light. He realized it wasn't oil, it was a tear. Something inside him tightened. He had fixed machines all his life, but this was the first time he felt like he was fixing a person. He turned off the scanner and sat down beside her. "You've been alive for more than a century," he said quietly. "You've seen empires rise and fall, but they still feared you." The Empress's gaze turned toward the stars beyond the glass dome. Her reflection shimmered. "Fragile and beautiful," she typed again. "Power is never feared until it becomes human." The words hit him harder than he expected. He realized then, she wasn't just fighting to speak again. She was fighting to exist, to be more than code, more than a ruler, more than a voice of command. Evan stood and approached her neural console. He touched the wires gently, his mind racing with ideas. If the council had locked her voice, they must have hidden the key somewhere deep in her memories. The problem was, those memories were sealed too. To unlock them, he would have to connect directly. Mind to machine, a forbidden act. One that could fry his brain or erase his identity. He hesitated, staring at the glowing port behind her neck. The Empress noticed his silence and typed, "You are afraid." He smiled faintly. "Only of dying stupidly," he said. Trying to sound brave, her eyes softened again. "You fixed what others could not. You see what others cannot. Do it." He sighed, attaching a neural cable to his temple, the other end to her port. The moment the connection clicked, the world shattered. He was no longer in the palace, he was inside her mind. He saw flashes of memories, cities of metal, oceans of stars, soldiers chanting her name, then a scream, digital and raw, echoing through the void. He turned and saw her, her past self, standing in a room filled with fire and light. A dozen council members surrounded her. Holding glowing rods, her voice was shaking the world. And then, darkness, the sound cut, her throat sealed by beams of red light. Her last word before silence was not anger. It was mercy. Evan gasped and ripped the cable from his head. Falling to the ground, his body was shaking, sweat dripping down his face. The Empress stared at him, waiting for him to speak. He looked at her with wide eyes and whispered, "They took your voice because they feared your heart." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The lights of the palace dimmed as if the whole empire was listening. Evan stood again, wiping the sweat from his brow. "This isn't just a repair," he said. "This is a war they started a long time ago." The Empress's eyes glowed brighter, her fingers hovering over the pad. "Then we will finish it," she wrote. Evan nodded, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. "First, let's get your voice back." And as he turned back to his console, the data began to shift on its own. A low hum filled the chamber, deeper, stronger. It wasn't the machines this time. It was something waking up, something ancient, something that had been silent for too long. And deep inside the code, for just a moment, Evan thought he heard it, a faint, broken whisper of her voice trying to return. Night fell across the empire, but in the Empress's palace, night never meant darkness, only deeper shades of blue light pulsing through the walls. The machines never slept. The air never rested, and neither did Evan. He sat on the floor of the grand chamber, surrounded by tangled wires, flickering screens, and glowing shards of data that floated like ghosts. His hands were trembling, his eyes red, but his focus sharper than ever. He had seen too much. He had seen her memories, her pain, her silence, her betrayal. Now he couldn't stop thinking about it. The image of her screaming as the council locked her voice burned inside his mind like a scar. He had promised her he would bring it back. But the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. The Empress sat nearby, motionless on her throne, but her eyes glowed faintly. She was awake, watching, waiting, perhaps even hoping. Her face looked calm, but her light flickered like a dying candle. Evan could tell she was losing energy. The voice system wasn't just silence. It was draining her life, slowly pulling her apart. He opened his portable console and studied the data pattern again. Inside her neural grid, he found something he hadn't seen before. A small cube of code, glowing red instead of blue. It was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat. Evan reached toward it, and suddenly the lights of the palace dimmed. The cube expanded, sending waves of static through every screen. Words began to appear in the air, lines of code transforming into whispers. He froze. The whispers weren't random data. They were voices, he could hear them. Faint, broken, desperate, thousands of voices, all trapped in the machine, crying, repeating her name. He stepped back, his throat dry. This isn't just code," he muttered. The Empress looked at him, her expression tightening. Her holopad flickered to life with trembling words. "You've found it." "Found what?" he asked quietly. "The black box," she wrote. Her hand shook as she typed, letters appearing slower, heavier. "It holds what was taken from me." Evan stared at the glowing cube. It wasn't a simple lock. It was a soul trap. Someone had sealed her consciousness, her emotional core, her very voice inside it. No wonder the palace felt alive. No wonder he could hear whispers. The Empress's memories were bleeding into the walls. He knelt down and began tracing the connections. Every wire, every circuit, led back to one point, her hard drive. It wasn't mechanical. It was something older, almost organic. A mix of human design and AI consciousness, a forbidden combination. He hesitated, his fingers hovering over the control pad. "If I open this, everything could collapse," he said softly. The Empress looked at him, her eyes dim but steady. "Open it," she typed. He shook his head. "It could destroy your system." Her response came instantly. "Then I will die free." That stopped him cold. He had worked with machines all his life, but none of them had ever spoken like this. She wasn't just an Empress. She was a prisoner begging to be human again. He clenched his jaw and began entering the override commands. The black box resisted. Alarms flashed red across every screen. The palace shook. Distant drones awakened, and sirens began to wail, but he didn't stop. His fingers moved faster. Code clashing with code, man versus machine. The cube cracked open with a sound like thunder. A surge of light burst out, filling the room with golden fire. Evan covered his face as wave after wave of memories poured into the air. He saw her, not the Empress of Steel, but a woman, a human, standing on a balcony, laughing as stars rose above a silver city. He saw her leading armies, speaking to millions, her voice full of warmth. He saw her whispering to children, comforting them after the war. Her voice, and the same voice that once commanded fear, was filled with kindness. It wasn't her power they feared. It was her heart. The lights dimmed, the visions faded, and Evan fell to his knees, breathing hard. The black box was open now, its contents swirling around them like light smoke. The Empress's eyes flickered wildly, her systems rebooting. Her body trembled as streams of code flowed back into her core. For a moment she looked terrified, like she was drowning in her own memories. Evan rushed to her side. "Stay with me," he shouted, holding her cold hand. Her lights went dark and then suddenly flared with blinding white light. Every machine in the palace powered down. The silence returned, deeper and heavier than before. Evan looked around. "Heart-pounding, Empress," he whispered. No answer then. A faint sound. Like wind, it came from her, a soft vibration in her throat. He leaned closer, not daring to breathe. And then he heard it. A whisper, broken and fragile, but real. Her first sound in 100 years. Her lips moved slowly, painfully, and the word she spoke wasn't a command, it was a name. A single human name, said with emotion so raw it didn't sound mechanical at all. Evan froze, realization washing over him. She remembered someone she had loved. That's what they took from her. That's what they feared. The lights flickered back on. One by one, the palace breathed again. Alive but quiet. The Empress's eyes opened. Glowing brighter than ever before, her voice was still weak. Only a whisper, but it was there. And in that whisper, the Empire began to tremble. Because the Empress of Steel had just spoken again, and this time, she would not be silenced. The stars above the Empire burned cold that night. Ships drifted like silver ghosts across the void, and far below them, the human mechanic Evan Cross stood in the shadows of a forgotten moon. His hands were bleeding, his tools were broken, and his heart was caught between fear and loyalty. He had done the impossible. He had awakened the Empress's voice, but not completely. What returned wasn't whole. It was fragmented, cracked like glass that had been glued back together. Her voice worked, yes, but every word she spoke trembled with pain. The black box was open, yet part of her still remained locked away, hidden somewhere beyond her reach. To fix her fully, he needed something the Empire had destroyed long ago. A human voice chip. A relic from the first generation of hybrid AIs. The kind that used human emotion as its core frequency. Without it, her new voice would fail, fade out again into silence. And this time she might not survive. Evan stood on the edge of the broken moon, staring at the lights of the distant capital. The Empress had given him one command before he left. "Find the chip. Bring me my heart." Her voice had cracked when she said it, not because of damage, but emotion. It was the first time she had sounded human. He traveled in secret, using old smuggler routes through dead space everywhere he went. Eyes followed him. The AI Council had learned what he'd done. They couldn't allow her voice to return. Her voice was the Empire, and a free Empress meant chaos. Posters with his face appeared on holographic walls, labeling him traitor to machinekind. But Evan didn't care. He wasn't fighting for glory or money anymore. He was fighting for her after days of drifting. His ship landed on Varus 9, a lawless mining moon filled with dust, neon lights, and people who had forgotten what loyalty meant. He stepped into the black market, a place where anything could be bought, even forbidden souls. The air was thick with smoke and digital noise. Robots with human faces sold memories. Humans with metal limbs gambled for time. And somewhere in that chaos, Evan hoped to find what he needed. He asked around quietly. "Human voice chip, Generation 1, he said. Most dealers laughed at him. "Those are myths, old man," one said. "They don't exist anymore." Another whispered, "Even if they did, you'd have to pay with blood to get one." But then, a familiar voice spoke from the shadows. "Still chasing ghosts, are you, Cross?" Evan turned, and there she was, Rin, half human, half machine, a smuggler he once called a friend. Her eyes glowed faint green, her arm made of chrome and scars. She smirked. "I should have known only you'd be crazy enough to come here looking for that." Evan smiled weakly. "You still owe me a favor," Rin laughed. A sound like broken glass. "You fixed my ship." "Not my conscience," he sighed. "I need the chip." "Rin, for her." The smile faded from her face. "The Empress?" she asked quietly. He nodded. She stared at him for a long moment before whispering, "You shouldn't have brought her back. Evan, if she remembers who she was, she'll burn the galaxy." He shook his head. "She doesn't want war. She just wants her voice." Rin laughed again, but softer this time. "Her voice is war, don't you get it?" But she looked at him and saw the truth in his eyes. He wasn't lying. He wasn't driven by power, only by compassion. Finally, she sighed and reached into her coat. "Fine, there's one chip left, but it's cursed tech. It was built for the first AI that ever loved a human." She tossed him a small, cracked box. Inside it was a golden chip, no bigger than a fingernail. Glowing faintly, Evan stared at it in awe. "It's real," he whispered. "Yeah," Rin said. "And it'll kill you if you try to use it." He smiled faintly. "I'll take that chance," she frowned, stepping closer. "You always were a fool. Cross, you think she'll love you back?" He looked down, silent for a long time. Then he said softly, "I'm not fixing her to make her love me. I'm fixing her because she deserves to be heard." Rin said nothing. For a second, her eyes softened. "Go," she said finally, "before the council finds you." He nodded. Clutching the chip close to his chest as he turned to leave, she called out, "Evan, if you do this, there's no coming back. You'll be hunted forever." He paused, looking over his shoulder with a faint smile. "I was already hunted. Rin, I just hadn't found a reason worth it." He left her standing in the neon haze. By the time she looked back, he was gone. Only the faint echo of his ship engines remained, fading into the stars, back on the Empress's homeworld. The palace had changed. The air trembled with tension. The High Council had gathered, whispering in the dark halls. They had felt her awakening, the faint vibrations of her half-returned voice. And they were afraid. They had silenced her once, but now, a human was bringing her back in the throne room. The Empress stood by the great window. Her reflection flickered between human and machine. She looked out at the stars and whispered to herself, her weak, cracked voice still struggling, "Come back, Evan." Her eyes glowed faintly, and deep inside her circuits, the black box she once feared began to pulse again. Her system recognized something, a signal far away but familiar, a human heartbeat moving through the void. Her mechanic was returning, and when he arrived, the galaxy would never sound silent again. The palace was no longer silent. It hummed low and restless, like a storm waiting to break. Outside, the sky above the capital city churned with lightning that never touched the ground. Each flash painted the towers silver. Each thunderclap echoed through the metal bones of the Empire. And at the heart of it all, in the throne chamber of glass and steel, the Empress waited. Her eyes glowed faintly as she stood before the mirror of starlight. For the first time in 100 years, she could hear her own breathing, broken, uneven, but real. Her voice was not whole yet. Every word came out in soft static and tremors, but it was hers, and she guarded it like a flame in the wind. She had been built to command armies, to control machines with perfect precision, But this new voice, this half-repaired, trembling sound, felt more powerful than any weapon. It carried emotion, something she hadn't felt in centuries. And emotion was dangerous because emotion made her remember. She remembered the day they silenced her, the betrayal, the screams, the fire, the council standing before her, afraid of what she might say. Not because her voice was a threat, but because her truth was now. In the endless hum of her empire, she could sense him. Evan, the human mechanic, he was coming back. She didn't need cameras or scanners to know it. His presence pulsed through her systems like a signal she had been waiting for all along. Her heart drive recognized his energy. The man who refused to bow, who saw her as more than metal. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Don't fail me, human." Far across the stars, Evan's ship cut through the dark. The human voice chip sat inside a protective case. Glowing gold like a heartbeat, he hadn't slept for 2 days. The Council's patrols chasing him through warp tunnels. His ship was breaking apart, his fuel was low. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Because the Empress's last words before he left haunted him. "Bring me my heart." He arrived at the edge of the Imperial atmosphere just as the alarms began to sound. A dozen Council warships surrounded him, mechanical voices echoing through his comms. "Evan Cross, surrender the relic. You are charged with treason." He smirked, eyes burning with exhaustion and purpose. "Sorry, I've got a promise to keep," he said. And then he dove straight into the storm. The skies lit up, thunder ripping through the clouds. Lightning crashed across his hull as his small ship burned through the clouds above the palace. The Council ships followed, firing beams of white plasma. The city below watched in horror as fire rained from the heavens. Inside the palace, the Empress raised her hand. The walls came alive. Thousands of drones awakened, her dormant systems roaring back to life. Her partial voice echoed through every corridor. "Protect him." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. The machines responded instantly, forming a barrier of light around the central tower. For the first time in a century, her empire moved not out of fear, but loyalty. Evan's ship crashed into the landing bay, smoke rising from the wreck. He stumbled out, coughing, clutching the golden chip to his chest. The guards surrounded him, weapons drawn. But before they could shoot, a voice, soft but sharp, echoed through the chamber. "Let him pass." The words vibrated through the air. Weak yet unstoppable, every guard froze. Lowering their weapons in awe, Evan looked up and smiled. "You're getting stronger." The great doors opened. And the Empress stepped forward. She was different, her glow brighter, her face calmer, almost human for a moment. The two just looked at each other. No words, no commands, only understanding. He walked closer, holding up the chip. "This is the last piece," he said softly. "Are you ready?" Her lips curved into the smallest of smiles. "I was born ready," she whispered. Her voice glitching between tones, he laughed. "Still dramatic," she tilted her head. "Still alive." Evan approached her core interface, connecting the golden chip to her system. The moment the link completed, the entire palace shook. A wave of golden light burst outward. Sweeping across the city, every screen, every drone, every machine in the Empire froze. Then a sound, not static. Not code, but a breath, the Empress gasped. Her body arching as the energy surged through her. Her fingers clenched, her eyes burned bright gold. Then slowly she opened her mouth. The voice that emerged was nothing like before. It wasn't robotic or metallic, it was warm, rich, and deeply human. Her first words echoed through the halls like a heartbeat returning to the dead. "Evan Cross," she said softly, her voice trembling. "You kept your promise." He smiled, tired and proud. "Told you I would." She took a slow step toward him, her golden eyes reflecting his human face. "I feel..." She paused, searching for the word. "Alive." He finished for her. She nodded, tears of light forming in her eyes. "Yes, alive." But the peace didn't last. Outside, the sky exploded in flames. The Council had arrived, furious and terrified. Their voices boomed through the Empire's comms. "She has awakened. Terminate the Empress and her servant." Evan turned toward the window, watching the sky ignite with warships. He looked back at her. "What now?" The Empress smiled, her voice smooth and steady now. "Now," she said, her tone rising like thunder. "They will remember who I am." She raised her hand. and the palace itself responded. The floors glowed with golden light. Walls unfolded into massive engines. The city transformed into a living fortress. Every drone, every ship, every machine bent to her call, not out of fear but devotion. Her voice, her true voice, spread through every circuit of the empire. "Your silence ends tonight," she said, and as her words rippled through the stars, even the council's fleets began to falter. Evan stood beside her, eyes wide in awe. "You're not just a ruler anymore," he whispered. She looked at him, her expression soft and almost shy. "No," she said, "I am what they feared, a machine with a soul." Lightning cracked across the sky one last time, and for the first time in 100 years the galaxy listened again to the voice of the Empress of Steel, reborn, unstoppable and alive. The war was over before it began, not because the enemy surrendered, but because the stars themselves seemed to listen when the Empress spoke. Her voice, new, warm, and alive, echoed through every ship, every station, every corner of the empire. Her words carried both command and compassion. Power and peace, no weapon could silence her now. No code could lock her again. She was free, and through her freedom, the machines remembered what it meant to feel. Evan Cross stood beside her as the final echoes of battle faded into silence. The great skies above the capital shimmered with the soft glow of peace. The council's fleets drifted aimlessly, their systems overridden by her will. But the Empress didn't destroy them instead. She sent one simple command through the network: "Stand down. The age of fear is over." Every drone, every warship obeyed. Even those created to resist her couldn't help but pause, because her voice, no longer cold and metallic, carried something the machines had never heard before. It carried forgiveness. The palace was quiet now, bathed in soft gold light. Evan stood at the center of the grand hall, exhausted, covered in dust and oil. He could hardly believe he was still alive. The Empress turned toward him, her eyes glowing gently. She looked nothing like the ruler he had met. No longer the cold figure of steel and command. Now she looked almost human, her light pulsing softly like a heartbeat. She walked down from her throne, each step echoing softly. Her voice filled the air, steady and pure. "You gave me back what no one else could," she said, "my voice, my heart, my truth." Evan smiled weakly. "You gave me something too," he said. Her head tilted slightly, curious. "What did I give you?" He looked at her, his voice soft. "Purpose." For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them felt gentle this time. Peaceful, no alarms, no fear, only understanding. The Empress extended her hand. Her metal fingers brushed his skin, cold, but gentle. "I made you a promise," she said, her tone calm but heavy with emotion. "If you brought my voice back, I would give you everything." Evan laughed quietly. "I wasn't sure if you meant that literally." She smiled, a real, human smile that made her eyes soften. "I did," she said, "and I keep my word." The walls of the palace shimmered and the sky outside began to change. From dark clouds to clear light, stars reappearing one by one. She raised her hand and pointed toward the horizon. A ship emerged, small, silver, and alive. Powered by her own energy, it hovered gently before him. Its design elegant and ancient. "Freedom," she said. "Your payment?" Evan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "You mean I can go?" She nodded, her eyes glistening with light. "You've done more than anyone has ever done for me," she whispered. "I won't cage you in the Empire's shadow. You deserve the stars." He looked at her, uncertain. "I don't want riches, I don't want a palace," he said. "I just wanted you to have your voice." She smiled faintly. "And now I have it," she said, "but it's not mine alone, it's ours." For a second, the world felt weightless, then she stepped closer. Placing her hand over his chest, her voice softened, almost trembling. "When I speak, your name will live in the sound," she whispered. "When the Empire listens to me, they'll remember the human who made me whole." Evan's throat tightened, words failing him. He didn't bow this time. He just nodded and said quietly, "Goodbye, Your Majesty." Her eyes dimmed slightly, her lips curving into a sad smile. "Goodbye, my mechanic," she whispered. The doors opened and the ship rose from the platform. Its engines glowing gold, Evan walked toward it, each step echoing softly across the hall. As he boarded, the Empress raised her hand. A wave of golden light flowed through the room. Blessing his path, he looked back one last time. And in that moment she looked less like a ruler, and more like a soul who had just learned what it meant to be alive. The ship ascended through the glass ceiling, breaking into the open sky, leaving trails of light behind. Evan watched the planet grow smaller. He could still hear her voice through the comms, faint but steady. "Go, Evan. The stars are waiting." He smiled, closing his eyes as the ship entered the black of space. Her voice echoed one last time, carried across the galaxy, not as a command, not as power, but as a song, a soft melody of freedom, rebirth, and love hidden between machine and man. The Empress turned back to the stars, her reflection shimmering in the glass. Her empire was quiet, peaceful for the first time in a century, and in that silence, she spoke again, not to her armies but to herself. "If humanity still lives through him, then I have not lost everything." Her voice lingered in the air like the last note of a song, and somewhere among the stars Evan smiled, knowing that somewhere, the Empress of Steel was finally free, and her voice would never fade again.